I think one of the things we've certainly heard coming back to us in really hundreds and thousands of voices has been the disproportionate spending on militaries and militarization. And I think it's not enough just to say, well, after we have the war, yes, of course, women should sit at the table. And I think that's why, these words in Nicholas Kristof's op-ed today, he begins with a story about a young girl who was forcibly married at the age of 10 in Yemen. But these words, he says, Nujood is a Yemeni girl, and it's no coincidence that Yemen abounds both in child brides and terrorists. Societies that repress women tend to be prone to violence. Now, I would argue that actually meant this society in the United States that spends more than the entire rest of the world combined on military sales. And despite the comment about Congo being the rape capital of the world, if we actually knew that the UK, the USA, and France earned more in sales from military weapons to the Congo last year than the entire amount of humanitarian aid that went to the Congo, we might ask ourselves indeed whether that is in turn a reflection of the undervaluing of women and children in this society. And I would argue that in fact it is.
Well, certainly the US presence in the Pacific is one of a military presence as well as a political presence. And so we're certainly looking at that as something like, okay, there's a shift, coming out of Asia and moving up to the Northern Pacific. And that's going to be quite an interesting situation. But if you look at it from the Fiji context, where we've got a military-led government and there's militarization happening. So the message to society at large is growing militarization is okay, the military might is okay. And it comes back to that whole thing of where are the values. If you've got this kind of, it's no longer about the quality, the solid voice of reason, but it's about military might. And in our society where we have my children's generation or a generation of people who only know this protracted cycle of conflicts going on 20, 25 years, what are we teaching them? How do we then transform a society to that picture postcard view of Fiji that we tend not to have anymore?
Militarization and militarism in societies is not simply a question of the presence of armed soldiers on the streets. So, you may have had a coup d'etat, but I still remember the words of Jacqueline Pitangui, one of the Brazilian feminists who was our board chair in 2001, right after Bush came to power in the first election. She said, the United States doesn't know it, but you have been through a coup d'etat. And I think militarization of societies is not just because you have military soldiers on the street enforcing. It also comes from a failure to invest in the other things in a society that are worthwhile. And I think that's where women and children, and actually our whole society in the United States, is right now paying a profoundly high price. Our schools are falling to pieces. Our infrastructure is falling to pieces. Healthcare is a joke. I mean, we have one of the worst health indices in the developed world. And I think that simply cannot be separated from the fact that we are hemorrhaging $1 billion a month to support essentially wars of aggression against, two countries and a huge military presence in places where we so-called don't have wars.